Well, welcome, of course, to the Southern League, My Life in Football, and we're back. And of course, we had a certain Mr. Ian Allinson on a few episodes ago, and look who's joined us tonight. It's the man himself, Mr. Lee Allinson, of course, manager of Hendon, and it's great to have you on, Lee.
No, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to
it. So, I mean, Lee, we'll start from the end, and then we'll jump back and then come back to the end at the end, if that's all right. I mean, Hendon, a bit of a in and out season for you this year, but got to be pleased to still be in that sort of step three. I know you'd probably like to be in the Isthmian step three, but at least you're in that sort of step three and pushing forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a. If I look back and look at it logically and look at what we pay out and look at the teams in the league, and you look at it from that way and you say, look, we're in the league and we've stayed in there and we had an awful run in at the end and with games, and we had a hard start that never went our way, and a couple of wins in them first 6 games, we'd have finished kind of mid-table. But from my side of it, as manager of the football club, I think it was a disappointing season, if I'm honest, and I want to do better because I've got higher standards than what I set last year. And I think we had better players for what we achieved, and that's where we have to improve next year. That's why I want to, make some changes at the football club and try and find a bit of a younger, hungrier side with players that want success, because we're renowned for players moving forward and kicking on. And last year, I just felt that we never really had that drive and desire from the whole squad. There was players in there that were magnificent for me last year, but it was just a really tough season, and one that I didn't expect. I thought on paper we looked a very good side, but paper don't win your football matches, unfortunately. And I think the first 6 games were a massive part of that problem, because you're forever catching up, and every time you seem to get on a run, one defeat pulls you back down, and then the confidence is low again. But for the standards that I like to set, I think it was a season that was really disappointing. But if I actually take my emotion out of it, we stayed in the league. That's the first and foremost thing that we do every year, is we want to stay in step 3, and then we want to kick on. I just want to stay in step 3 by Christmas and then kick on for the playoffs after Christmas. But that's what we're aiming for next year. But look, we've done the job. It was a really tough last 7 days in the league, emotions running wild, but we managed to do it, and we stayed in the league.
Happy days. I mean, and of course also as well, you've got some of your players, some of what you'd probably class as your important players have already put pen to paper and said that they're staying, so that's got to be bonus. But I mean, the one player that I know you had last year, and I think he's probably one of my favourite defenders in non-league football, in all fairness. And I'm not sure if you've managed to get his name on paper. You might not be able. Probably might not tell me on camera, but he's a certain Daniel Matasuka.
Yeah, we'll talk and go. When's this coming out?
About 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. I'll ask you afterwards.
No, we're very close. Dan was excellent for me when he come into the football club. I felt he was one of the reasons why our results turned, because he strengthened us up at the back. Fantastic lad, no ego about him. Does his job, and look, we're talking at the moment. We are very close to agreeing something, but like anything at this level, you sort of have to wait and see what walks through the door on the 29th of June. I've been very fortunate that I've kept my captain. I'm fortunate that I've kept 3 others as well, which are really important to what I'm trying to build next season, because they're important players. And if Dan can become one of them as well, I think we've got a really good spine to work with. And then it's about flooding it with hungry players that want success, players that want to kick on from the level. And as I say, we've got a proven track record of moving people forward into bigger things. As I say, Tafari Moore was with us last year. He's just played in the playoff final for St Albans and won Players Player. Jaden Clark's just made his debut for Gillingham. So we've got a track record of this, and that's what we've got to get back to as a football club, of getting them hungry players who want to do well. And as I say, that falls on me. Made some mistakes last year, but every player that played for me last year were good boys, good lads. It just didn't quite fit and didn't quite work, and we need to go down a little bit of a different avenue, freshen it up, some fresh faces, and hopefully with the likes of Joe, Nico, Dave DeHagew, Perry and hopefully Dan Matziaka, we can build from there.
I suppose we should say as well, while we're on camera as well, unlucky to your brother-in-law. I thought he was going to take the title, but that pesky Jimmy White.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It was, for me, it's the first time I'm following my brother-in-law's snooker career for many years now, and he's probably, he won't mind me saying, not achieved what his talent should allow him to achieve. He's one of the most talented players on the tour, but for one thing or another, it hasn't really happened. But to be at the Crucible and watch him live was intense. I thought being in the dugout was intense. This was, but his performances were incredible. And I was listening to the commentary, and when they kind of liken you to a top 10 player in the world, that's how well he was playing. It makes you very proud. And I think as well, the sport is so difficult. Snooker for me is one of the hardest individual sports out there. The touch and feel you have to have around the table, and the control of the cue ball is just, it's so hard. And mentally, you play a great shot, your confidence is flying. And if you play a poor shot, your confidence is really low. But to be able to experience that with him, and probably just didn't quite get to the level we needed to for the final. It's a big occasion. He played in the daytime already, and probably that waiting time of 3-4 hours building up to it, he probably needed the next day. But I was incredibly proud of him. I thought he was outstanding, if I'm honest. And he's a character, brother-in-law, one of the biggest characters I know, and he's made for the big stage. He really is, and I think that showed on his performances. To walk out the Crucible for probably only second, third time in his career, to perform like that was incredible.
So, with yourself, I mean, how, going right back to the beginning, I mean, how did it all sort of start for Lee, and how much pressure, or was there any pressure with having a very, very famous dad in the footballing world? Was there a lot of pressure on your shoulders when you did start out?
I think listen, it started really young, probably 3-4 years of age, playing football. Absolutely obsessed with the game. Probably by 10, 11, probably obsessed with managing rather than playing. Yeah, that was hard. He was hard on me because I think he see so much potential. But I think these kids now that come from nothing and do well in the game, they've just got a different drive to people like myself, because I had everything, really, if I'm honest, and everything was on a plate for me. I was driven to every single game, every single training session. I never went without. I never had to make my own way to places, and probably had a silver spoon in my mouth, if I'm honest. And although Dad was hard on me, him and Mum were so supportive, and I just probably didn't. Well, I know I was a lazy sod. It's as simple as that. I was as lazy as they come. He would try and get me to do extras, but I didn't really want to do it. And I was very, very gifted. Probably, didn't reach the potential, and I'll probably go on to that a little bit later, that I should have reached. And by the time you get to 16, 17, I mean, you kind of, back then, I think it was written off a little bit more earlier than where you are now. People are getting pro deals at 21, 22 now, because non-league football's so good, and the game's evolving all the time. But at 16, I didn't do enough. I was at Watford at the time. I was at Watford with Ashley Young. We grew up together, and he was released at the same time as me, but he had a drive and a desire to get to the top. Now, out of that group of players that I was with at that time, you would never say Ashley would go on to do what he's achieved in the game. 37, 38 years of age, new contract at Aston Villa. So you only got to see Steven Gerrard talking about him the other day about his drive and desire. And that's what I lacked, unfortunately, as a footballer. And I remember early on that if Dad had a game, I mean, I was brought up in a changing room, literally brought up watching Dad work, watching his teams, being around and involved at football clubs. And for me, that was kind of what I wanted to do. So it was a strange one. If Dad had a game on a Tuesday night and I had a training session, I'd skip training to go and watch Dad's game and do the warm up and warm the keeper up and be around it and take in all the information that was going on, and loved it. And that's probably where I went. Well, it was where I went wrong. Lacked half a yard of pace, but technically I was very, very good. But yeah, lazy. lazy, and that's what I try and put into my players now, or anyone that I can give advice to, is work as hard as you can, because football is about hard work. And the one thing I probably didn't understand or know till I was probably 27, 28 was how hard you have to work in the game. And, you know, as I say, I probably got by early by just a goal. I could pass the ball. I had talent. I had good talent. Probably didn't reach the potential because, one, laziness, and two, probably a little bit of a lack of belief. I was one of them characters as a football player that I had to be the big player in the small pond. But you know, I wasn't great around big characters. You know, probably went within myself a little bit. But as I say, I still had a good non-league career, and you know, won 3 or 4 promotions, and I'm sure we'll go on them shortly, and FA Cup runs, and yeah, I done okay, but I should have done better, if I'm honest.
So I take it you was like the start was at school, and then you get scouted to go into Watford.
Yeah, I started as a young lad at a local club called Bedwell Rangers in Stevenage, which is still going now. Believe it or not, my dad played for him as a kid, and I went there, and I played a year up, and I was a centre forward as a kid, and I just had an eye for goal. I'd literally anything that come in the box, I'd finish, and stick it in the back of the net every single chance I had, and that was what I was very good at young. And then an opportunity come to go to Watford, and again, like looking back, like, sounds mad. It didn't really do anything for me. I'd rather have played with my mates and scored goal after goal after goal. And they were trying to. I go back now, and a good friend of mine was my manager at the time at Watford, Chris Cummins, who was the Langley manager, and our paths cross later on in life is amazing. And he says to me, first time I see him back from probably 15 years, he's still a lazy little sod, because that's what I was. And you know, I had the talent, but I as I say, I wanted, you know, we are fortunate we were playing top Premier League clubs at the time, and I played in a game with Chris Eagles and Kieran Richardson, who was at West Ham at the time. Chris Eagles was at Watford. Lo and behold, a Man United scout was there. We never see the pair of them again. They'd both been signed by Man United. They were the opportunities that I had, and just for one reason or another, whether it's hunger, desire, I think I went through some stuff as a kid that I probably didn't realise what I went through till later on in life, in terms of anxiety and some OCD problems and stuff like that, that I didn't understand what I was going through. But I was kind of just happy playing with mates. And I think this is where our system goes wrong, you know, in terms of lads are being signed 8, 9 years of age now, and not understanding what it's like to enjoy football. You see the pressure that they put on them, and if they're released at 10, 11, 12 years of age, the distraughtness in them. And actually, there's some fun to be had out there, and there's some good friends that you can make from the game, and games of football where you can go and enjoy and win some trophies and play for some bits and pieces. But I do understand that we have a system that we have to work to that makes players better, I suppose. But for me, it was just about, I enjoyed it with my friends. I enjoyed it at Watford. I had a great time, but to the back end, I lost that. I lost that edge and that enthusiasm for it, and I was lazy, if I'm honest.
So what was that like though for yourself, even for yourself, like, you know, coming to the end of that sort of Watford part of your career and being let go by Watford? What sort of things then going into your head then? Is it, you know, because I and again, I'm looking from the outside in, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I've just been let go by Watford. How do I go home and tell my dad that I've just been let go from Watford? That sort of scenario, because of it would be harder for you than maybe for me, whose dad wasn't a professional footballer.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was fortunate. I was a very good tennis player as well as a kid, and I had an opportunity to go full time either way. I obviously looked like I made the wrong decision, because I probably should have gone tennis, but maybe that was the path I should have took. But I think you get to an age of 40, about 15. As a kid, I suffered badly with asthma, and I was put on steroids as a young lad. And it stunted my growth. So at sort of 16, when everyone was fully developed or developing, I was probably 2 years behind everyone else. So I was very small, hadn't filled out. I was a little boy playing against teenage men, if I'm honest with you. So I was way out my depth at the time. Whereas sort of 30 or 11, 12, 13, we were all around the same sort of size, age, and I was good. So it got to a point where I think Dad see it coming, and I wasn't happy, and kind of got to October, and we had a meeting, and this is how mad football is. I remember John McDermott sat us down, and John's very high up in the football world now, and he set us down, and it was getting to a decision where Dad was going to pull me out, and he said, well, I was small, and he said, well, what we've worked out in this country is that anyone born from September to January is physically bigger and better than anyone born from February to August.
Mm-hmm.
And then he asked when my birthday was, and it was in September. So that was screwed up and put in the bin. I was just a late developer, and that's what I'm very big on now. If I see a player at 11, 12 years of age who's technically spot on, or 14, 15, who's very, very good, but physically not yet there yet, I know by the time they're 18, 19, 20, and they're not losing that quality. I've got it with my nephew at the moment, technically phenomenal, but physically probably not quite there yet. He's been at Arsenal, Bristol Rovers, and he's on his next part of his journey. But that quality is always going to be there, and that was kind of me. But he pulled me out in October, and I went, and I was 16 at the time, and I went and played with some friends. I then went on a couple of trials. I went to Colchester, and actually, the trial I had, I was outstanding. I played really well. I played in a new position, in which I ended up playing later on in my career, which was kind of number 10 midfield, and I was outstanding. And I thought I was nailed on for a deal. For me, best thing that ever happened. I didn't get a deal because mentally, I was never, ever, ever ready to move away from home. I would have lasted 5 minutes.
Hmm.
I didn't get a deal, and then it was. I went on trial at Stevenage Football Club, but it wasn't really an academy at the time. It was a college program, and I didn't even get in that. That's how probably gone I was with football, and mentally gone, and physically nowhere near it. And I ended up playing for a guy called Malcolm Allen, ex-Newcastle Welsh international, and he had a college program set up that ran alongside the Stevenage scheme. We were Letchworth at the time, it was called, and a guy called Dave Reddington. Dave is working now in Iceland, I believe, or Sweden. He was assistant manager at Crystal Palace over the last 3 years. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. 2 years of college and football every day. It brought me on bundles, got a bit of self-belief back, and believed in myself. And again, I was probably that big fish in the small pond, and it was great. And I then got offered to go over to Stevenage and play some games for them. But I was happy where I was, and had a great time. And actually, Dad was manager of Arlesey Town at the time, and I made my debut at Clevedon away at 15 years of age, or 16 years of age in the FA Trophy. So I was always that. I don't know what it is with me. I just find non-league football so much more fun than I do football league. I don't know why. I just think probably because of how I was brought up and where I was brought up. Then I had 2 years there till I was 18, and thoroughly enjoyed myself.
So from there, I mean, whereabouts did you move on from there?
Yeah, then I'm. This is a big one for me. I sort of, when lads get to 18, and I say it to them all the time, you're now a baby going into men's football, and it's how patient you want to be will determine whether you have a career in football, whether you have a career in non-league football. And you'll see some 18, 19-year-olds fully develop and smash non-league football. You'll see late developers, 22, 23, 24, that start to come through and think, where have they been for the last couple of years? So I sort of then, I played for Barton Rovers under Dad, and I played for Borehamwood Reserves, and I played for Stopfold, and I was just sort of floating around, but staying in there. I'd sit on the bench. I would do anything to get my opportunity. I'd get an opportunity. I was playing against men. I probably weren't quite ready, but I'd do okay. And I had a season at Stopfold under a manager called Steve Cook. I think very, very good manager. Steve got the Borehamwood job. Dad was director of football at Borehamwood. Obviously, Danny Hunter was a chairman. And Steve took me over to Borehamwood at the time, and as a young player, sort of in the reserves, in the first team, and I remember I sat on the bench for 10 games in a row. And I actually remember getting my first paycheck, and I think I owed the club still 15 quid, because I was on. It wasn't about money. It was about being the opportunity of playing football. I loved it, and I'd still play Sunday morning in the Sunday league with friends and stuff like that. But it was that opportunity, and I sat on the bench for 10 games in a row. And I remember Potton United at the time were doing very well in Step 5. They'd made an approach for me, and I spoke to Cookie at the time, and he said, "Look, you're going to get your opportunity on Saturday against St Albans Town." So for me, it was a great opportunity. St Albans was struggling at the time, and I scored 2 on my debut, and magnificent, brilliant it was. Won the game, scored 2, done really well, and then the Big Boys League. We went to, I think I played the next game, and then we went to Chelmsford away, and learnt my lesson very, very quickly. They had Jeff Minton in midfield, unbelievable player. And I remember trying to give a whack to the centre half, and before I know it, the ball's in the air and he's kneed me in the back, and that was me taken off the pitch. And again, just probably not quite ready. 19, 20, 21. I just wasn't quite ready for the level. Later on, I managed to do it, but I just physically wasn't ready. And then decided I went on to Potton United, and then had a spell. Dad left Borehamwood. He took over Stotfold at Step 5, who were bottom at the time. We were third at Potton. He managed to keep them up, and 8 of us went over to Stotfold, and that then probably where it really kicked on for me. I think I scored 34 goals from midfield that year. Something just clicked. Don't know what it was. We won the league, first time they'd ever won the league at Step 5. Unfortunately, the ground wasn't good enough to go up. Brett's obviously done it now with Stotfold. They just got into Step 4, and what a good job they've done there. But that team was brilliant. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. Great plan under Dad, obviously. And then he got the Borehamwood job and took me across there.
What was that like? What was that like? Going back there, going back to second time. I was just saying to your dad, what was it a little bit like, sort of returning home?
I think. I played over 100 games for Borehamwood. I was in the season that got them promoted to the Conference South. I set up the first goal. My best friend at the time, who sadly passed away, Ryan Moran, Trigger, scored the goal. We won the game 2-0 against Kingstonian. Conference South, I think I massively underachieved. I was nowhere near the player I should have been. I felt probably, again, I had good games. My best games were in pre-season. I was unbelievable. No pressure on the game. And that's, again, where some regrets. I just always felt like I'm totally different as a manager. It's such a strange feeling as a player. I probably felt like, I shouldn't be here. And not, Dad was ruthless with me. Ruthless. And anyone would say, "Oh, you only played there because your dad." Let me tell you now, that guy would not play me. He'd take me off in a heartbeat if I weren't doing the business. And I played a lot of games there, so I must have been doing all right. But I look back to how good I was at Biggleswade Town and Arlesey Town, and I never, ever, ever achieved what I should have done at Borehamwood. Never. And that is a big regret of mine. I really didn't. I didn't produce what I felt like I should have produced there, and maybe a couple of reasons. Maybe big players again. Made some great friends out of that football club. And I'm very lucky to be a part of, what Danny and Luke Garrard have done there now is incredible, unbelievable. And I firmly believe there'll be a football league club very, very soon. But for me, if I look back on my career, that's probably my biggest disappointment, that I don't really think I showed what I could have done. And if I had my time again, I would go away. I would work extremely hard at looking after myself properly, making sure I do the right things, making sure that I'm not inferior of other players around me, and showing the quality that I had, because I did have good quality, and I don't feel like I really produced that on the pitch. Never really took the game by the scruff of the neck and dominated the game. Sort of went through games, and some games I was good, some games I just floated through and just done enough, and that was a regret of mine.
So, I mean, what you go from that sort of disappointment of not playing that well then, at Borehamwood. So I mean, does your dad then put your arm around your shoulder and say, look, this is what you need to work harder, son, or that sort of thing, or do you just realise that yourself and then move on to the next challenge?
No, me and Dad have a great relationship, but we sometimes, he would probably give me a bit of a not necessarily a bollocking, but tell me if I wasn't doing it or something like that. I just feel it come to an end. They were moving forward as a football club. They were progressing. The game was evolving. Again, come down to myself that I didn't probably look after myself properly. And that's where I had to do better. And this is what I'm trying to guide these younger players and the players I've got now about looking after yourself, because you have so many regrets. That was one of mine. I should have played longer in the Conference South, in my opinion. I had every opportunity to do better, but I didn't take that opportunity. Yes, mentally I could have been stronger. Yes, I could have been better. But I think a lot of that comes down to mindset, comes down to graft. And I just, again, I wasn't in a great place, and there was a couple of times where I felt I could have come on, and Dad left me on the bench, and I was getting to a point where I didn't want to fall out with Dad. And at the time, Arlesey Football Club were throwing around quite good money, for I felt probably what I'd done at Borehamwood. I probably felt like I deserved a little bit more money at the time. But again, like anything, when it's your dad, he's probably quite easy. I'd have played for. I'll go for a story later when I was at Biggleswade when I played for nothing because I kicked off. But Arlesey Town come in for me, dropping 2 levels, and they offered me half decent money, and I just said to Dad, "Look, I think I'm gonna go." And Zima Abbey and Gary King were the management team there. And I took the jump and I left. I dropped 2 leagues. And I remember going there on the Thursday night and ringing my dad on the Friday. Great chat with Danny Hunter when I left, and he was brilliant with me. And then I remember ringing Dad after training and saying, "What have I done? Can I come back? I've messed up here," because I didn't really the whole setup was completely different. I was fortunate. One of the lads, I was on the bench on a Saturday, and one of the lads got injured and took my shirt, man of the match for 3 games in a row, and yeah, loved it. And we had a remarkable season.
Who was in that sort of what step 4 was that then?
Step 4, Hitchin Town were winning the league, and I'll tell you the story now. You wouldn't believe it. We played. We had a very good side. Ryan Frater, Dave Deeney, Chris Dillon, Stuart Sinclair, who went on to the Football League. Joel Mason. The list goes on. It was a good side. Really, but Hitchin Town were brilliant. John Frendo up front and Zach Burke, and they were untouchable. And I remember playing them just after Christmas at Arlesey. They beat us 2-0. I think they put them 18 points clear. We had 1 or 2 games in hand. I think there was about 14 games to go, and we kept ticking them off with wins, and somewhere or another, Hitchin kept losing games of football, and absolute madness. Before you know it, we had to play AFC Hayes at the time, and we had to win away from home to win the league, and we had 3 games to go. We had AFC Hayes on the Tuesday, we had Uxbridge on the Saturday, and we had Hitchin away on the Monday. So this is a great story. It's great. So we go to AFC Hayes, and all we know is we have to win the game. We've won the league. So we're 0-0 after the first half. We're by far better side. We just couldn't score. I think I set Chris Dillon up for the first goal. And then we score again and we win the game 2-0. So the scenes after the game, we're jumping up and down. My mate at the time, Cameron Moyer, was playing for us, a very good player, very good non-league player. And he, sorry, mate, lost you. And I've looked at him and I'm thinking he's not celebrating. And I've looked at the 2 managers, Gary and Zima Abbey, and they're not celebrating either. I'm thinking, what's going on? They were jumping around, and we walk in the change rooms, and Kingy says to us, "Listen, boys, we've got some news. We haven't won the league tonight. We've played an eligible player for the last 2 weeks. The league have deducted us 5 points or something like that it was. And basically what we had to do is we had to beat Uxbridge on the Saturday and we had to beat Hitchin Town on the Monday. Hitchin Town had to draw with us on the Monday to win the league. I thought Hitchin Town were a better side than us, if I'm honest. We played Uxbridge on a Saturday. We won 3-1. It all rode on Hitchin on the Monday. 2,500 people there. We were 0-0. That's all I needed. 83rd minute, Stuart Sinclair popped up with a winner. And we won the league, and it was a fantastic achievement, really, really good achievement. And then I spent another season with them at Step 3 before moving on to Biggleswade Town.
That must have been a weird thing, though, wasn't it? Everybody, I suppose the fans must have been quite excited about winning the league, and then not wondering what was going on as well.
Yeah, it was really, really mad. I mean, we wasn't a massively supported football club, but we had a good few. But I mean, it was probably made sweeter because Hitchin were the ones that found out. Hitchin were the ones that got us the points deduction. Hitchin, and without Gary King at the time, who fought his case for us to give us the opportunity to beat Hitchin. I mean, that's one of that rugby Kingstonians were the 3 games that really stick in the memory in terms of, you know, we've gone to Hitchin Town, their backyard, and beaten 1-0 to win the league, and the scenes were incredible. They really were after the game, because there was probably 2,000 Hitchin fans and probably 30 Arlesey fans at the time, and we partied long and hard into the night after that.
And I bet you the secretary down at Arlesey was quite relieved.
He absolutely was, yeah, he was, and no, listen, it was deserved because we went on a great run to get us up. I felt Hitchin were the best side, but Hitchin went up that year anyway through the playoffs, which was good in the end because I had some good friends there.
So what, you're going into sort of Step 3? I mean, what league did that send you into at Step 3?
That was a Southern Prem.
Right.
That was tough. You know, Hitchin. You had Hitchin, you had Chippenham, you had Truro, you had some really hard games, and we struggled that year. We again probably a bit like the season I had last year. We had really good players, but probably lacked a little bit of legs in the side. And we stayed up on the last day, and we had to draw with Chippenham on the last game of the season. And I scored an own goal to put us 1-0 down with 20 minutes to go. Come off my head, a free kick come in the box, hit my head and flew in the top corner. But fortunately for me, I played it out to Stephen Bailey, who crossed the ball, and our manager come on at the time, Zima Abbey, and he headed one in. Great header, and we drew the game and stayed up.
And what did Arlesey still in when you left them? Or still in Step 3 when you left them?
Yeah, they got in the playoffs a year after. Zima was a very, very good manager. One of the best ones tactically for me. He was very in depth, probably too in depth at times. He was, you know, intense on the work that he done. I remember he used to give us a report on each player travelling up to games. It was no good for me because I was a little bit of a fairy as a football player. I was able to give a lot of mouth, but I didn't really like a tackle. So when I used to see 2 6'4" centre midfielders, I'm thinking, oh no, what am I playing against today? But his work that he put into his planning and prepping for games was outstanding. And to be fair, for one reason or another, I'd like to know, really, with Zima, I still speak to him. I'd like to know why he never really kicked on. I think family and children probably stopped. But I felt Zima was one that could have kicked on as a manager. I thought he was very, very good. And he got, as I say, he got Arlesey into the playoffs or just outside the playoffs. I think he got St Albans into it just after. Good manager. Him and Gary King were a really good fit. And Gary's a director of football at Barnet now with Dean Brennan. So good people. Not a bad word to say about either of them. I thought Zima was outstanding.
So from there, then what made you leave Arlesey then to go to Biggleswade?
Again, it was probably one of them things. Arlesey had a big side of characters, and I was again probably a little bit suppressed in myself and never really come out. And got a phone call one day. Biggleswade had just opened their new ground. I played very, very well there the year before. With a lad called Adam Watkins in midfield, who was on loan from Luton at the time. He's a Burko now, good player, and the pair of us played very well that day. And I got a call from, he's a lunatic, Chris Nunn, who's manager of Rushden now. What a manager, what a guy.
Just say, I mean, you just said there about that. Was you surprised to see them get put into the Northern League?
Rushton, I think they're
Yeah.
on that border. I think they're on that border. I think that Nunny, I call him, or Gaffer. I think he kind of accepts it. But he'll accept that, and they'll be all right. But brilliant manager, and he rang me in the summer, and I wasn't that keen. Arlesey were kind of playing around. I don't think they really wanted me, but I could offer them something. And Chris just wouldn't leave me alone. He'd ring me. I was on holiday, but he wouldn't ring me about signing for anyone. He wouldn't ring me about signing. He'd just ring me about life and just talk to me. And I'm thinking, I've never had this. This guy's incredible. And he was just brilliant. And I made the decision to go across to Biggleswade Town. And that's probably where it all started, really.
Mm. So what was that? What was that like then? Because you see, I know you've spoken about the other clubs, but and I was expecting sort of Borehamwood to be the one, but you just sort of come alive then when you sort of spoke about Biggleswade Town. So what was it about Biggleswade Town then that and that made it so good for you in there when you just turned it around? I mean, what happened?
The manager was just incredible. Listen. I personally, I put my dad as the best manager I've ever played for. Unbelievable. Zima Abbey, tactically, unbelievable. Steve Cook was a brilliant manager. Chris Nunn is different to all of them. He is when you need pressure off, he's the best manager to play for. He never shouted at me once. We had one terrible season where again he brought in some big fishes that didn't fit our football club. He was just incredible, and he got a good side around him. I brought Joel Mason with me from Arlesey Town. Me and Joel were a little bit of a car school together. He was a good player. There was a lad, Andrew Delimo, who we called him Twinny. He was a good player. And we just built a group of players that were a very, very good side. And we won promotion first year, got into step 3. But the gaffer, I still call him Gaffer now, Chris, was just brilliant for me. And I met my wife at the time, and we went through. She looked after me really well in terms of my football and getting me right and getting me fit and that's probably the fittest I've ever been. The way I lifted weights and done the right stuff to be at the peak of my performance. 10 years too late, but it gave me that extra yard and that extra step. And I played by far my best football at Biggleswade Town. I was outstanding, I felt. And, there's not me trying to big it up because I told you before about, I've been poor in other areas. I played really well and I put a lot down to Chris. The football club was brilliant. The pitch was unbelievable. The setup was amazing. And it started me into that managerial career as well. But, we got to the playoff final in the first game or the first season, rugby away. 3,000 people there. Rugby were a massive club. We 1-0 down. We got a penalty, which I scored. And then we scored 2 goals with 7 minutes to go to get promoted into step 3. And all that was down to Chris. No 2 ways about it, because of the way he looked after his players, the way he managed us. He was superb.
And I mean, from there, I mean, you go into into step 3. I mean, what was that like then, going back into that sort of league again?
Unbelievable. We were brilliant. It's mad, isn't it? It's just crazy, isn't it? How everything's different. We were brilliant. First round proper of the FA Cup. I've been very unfortunate as a player. I've got to the first round proper of the FA Cup twice. First year was at Arlesey. We played Salisbury away and got beat. And the second year we got there with Biggleswade Town. Great achievement. And we got a Stourbridge away. So we've been very, very unfortunate with the FA Cup draws. But we finished 8th, I believe, that season in a really tough league. But we were a good side. We could mix it. We could play. We had good players. We had hard working players. But it all come from the gaffer. Just took the pressure off. He didn't care if we won or lost. There was no pressure on us to win or lose. And I think that goes a long way. And the season after, we had a really hard season and just stayed up by the skin of our teeth. That was tough. That was really tough. And there was problems with payments and bits like that. But, he was just great. And we had falling outs as player and managers do and stuff like that. I was hot-headed at times, but it just such a good manager to play for me. Not for everyone. I always say it now, and Gaffer he'll tell you the same. I think you have to be a self-motivator to play for Nunny, because he is a laugh and a joke a minute. You know, he's not one of them who's going to sit you down and really grill you or get into you to roll you up. You've got to do that yourself, because he is fun. He's fun, and he takes the fun element with everything. Some of the team talks he done was incredible. You know, he likened things to James Bond movies. This is half time. I'm thinking, I'm used to my old man throwing cups of tea up the wall and spoons at people and sugar, and I've got Chris Nunn telling us about James Bond, and when the villain don't kill James Bond, he always comes back and bites you. But there was a method behind it. You know, we were 1-0 up and we hadn't finished the team off. And he's saying, go and finish him off now, because you're going to have a James Bond scenario where James Bond's coming back and he's going to beat you. So you actually look back and you think, what an analogy. Unbelievable. You know, but that's how he was, honestly, he was so good. For me, and for a lot of other players that played for him, he wasn't everyone's cup of tea. And Gaffer will tell you that. He'll say that now. And I speak to him twice a week. But he was brilliant. And as I say, everything had there was no debrief after games. There was no big debrief before games. You know, it was unlucky, go again, see you Tuesday, or unlucky, having a week off, see you next week, let's go again. It was literally like that. And he was brilliant at it.
And I mean, it sounds like that's the type of manager you really enjoyed. You and the players actually enjoyed playing for as well because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I played great football under Dad at Stotfold, but I felt like I was probably better than the level, if I'm honest. So that was better. I say Borehamwood, I don't feel I achieved what I did. I played well at Arlesey, struggled at the back end, but Biggleswade, there was just a different feel about the place. And I would say I'm probably a confidence player. I was probably a confidence player, but with Chris, there was just a freedom. And even when I played badly, I knew I played bad, but he'd message me, "What a great performance today." I'm thinking, Gaffer, you're just like, I was awful, but it was just the way he went about. He knew how to manage me, and you know, as I say, I was a hothead, and we played one game. We played Truro away, Truro at home on a Tuesday night, and I think we were 1-0 up. I scored. And I actually got one of our younger players who was struggling a little bit off the pitch from our academy to come and watch me. I said, just come and watch and see how I do things. And it didn't work too well. And I remember laying it into the centre forward, and he's not controlled it. And he's had a pop at me, and I've had a pop back at him. And the next thing, he's got me by the scruff of the neck, and I've got him by the scruff of the neck. And hand-based, look, he'd have beat me up quite comfortably. Trust me on that. But it was, and I looked round, and 60 minutes, and he took us both off. For me, I think with me, what it was I just had to know I was playing. If I knew I was under no pressure and I was playing week in, week out, you get the best out of me. So with Nunny, I knew if I was fit, if I was in the squad, I was playing. I think there was one occasion where my wife wasn't very well at the time. I'd missed a game. They'd won a game. And I remember him ringing me saying, "Look, mate, I just can't start you." I understood that. So when he took me off, couldn't believe it, and he took us both off, and I've called Gaffer everything. I've walked round the side. The chairman's had a pop at me. I've had a pop back at him. I've had a big sulk. He's not rang me for 2 days. Then he rings me and he's like, "Look, we've made a decision." Now I'm thinking, well, to be fair, I regretted it, but at the same time, I was hot-headed. I wanted to win. And this is the kind of character I was, and he was. He said, "Look, we've made a decision. You either sit out the next 2 weeks and get paid full money, or you play for nothing. Can we crack on as normal for the next 2 weeks?" It wasn't even a decision. I just said, "See you Saturday, Gaffer," and I was back in the side on the Saturday, and that's how I was. I wasn't money orientated footballer. I probably should have earned more than I did, but I wasn't that way. But I just loved playing for him because I knew I was going to play. I knew that he'd get the best out of me. I'd never got a bollocking off him. Like, honestly, he never ever told me do better, but that's what he's really good at, and but some players, that probably doesn't get the best out of other players. Some people need push into that. I didn't. I was a self-motivator. I knew if I was doing well enough. I knew if I wasn't. I knew if I was working hard enough. I knew if I wasn't. I was the biggest critic. If I played poorly, I couldn't sleep for days, no matter what team I played for. Even I do it now for the vets. When I have a bad game, I'm like, I've got to go and play again. I can't play like that. So I'm very critical of myself. And he had a lot of players like that. And that's probably where he went wrong the year after. But You know, it was just, it was just a great fit for me. And I mean, last story, I'll tell you, I remember having a severe infection in my big toe. We played Guildford City at home, and I mean, I couldn't walk. It was the worst infection. I mean, I had to have it operated on 2 days later, but I managed to force a boot on. And he's like, "You're fit?" I said, "Yeah, Gaffer, I'm fit. I can play." I've limped around the pitch. I've scored straight from a corner. And I remember at half time, I said, "I need ice and water, ice and water." My foot was completely infected. And I put it in a bucket. Anyway, I come out the second half, and I mean, I'm limping. But he did how much I just wanted to play my football. He took me off. I was fuming. Again, I had a bit of a barney with him. I said, "How are you taking me off?" He's like, you can't walk." And it was just, but I just loved playing for him, and I loved playing football. I loved it. It was my most enjoyable time because I was just free. I was under no pressure. I was free to play, and that's what I loved.
So what was the in the end, I mean, what made you leave there?
No, it was the transition then. That's what started. So the following year, we had an awful season, really hard season. He brought in a lot of players that didn't fit what the gaffer was all about, and a few of us stayed, a couple left, and it was trying to rebuild. And we stayed up on sort of the second from last game of the season. But with 10 games to go, I got it still affects me to this day. I got a really bad hip injury. Yet again, me being me, couldn't miss a game. I had a tear in my hip. I would warm up in agony. I'd dose myself up, and I'd play through the game. And then 2 days, I wouldn't be able to walk. And I played like that for the last 10 games. I remember one point again, he was going to drop me, and I found out, and I rang him and said, "Gaffer, don't drop me." And he never dropped me. He played me, and I scored. But I was in agony, absolute agony. And it got to a point where I was only 30, 31. And this is where I say to players now, look after yourself, because you don't know when it sneaks up on you. I was gone. I was physically gone. Nothing. I didn't have a run in me. And I made the decision I was just going to probably drop step 4, step 5, and see out the next couple of years, probably if the leg would have allowed me to. And he rang me. He rang me, said, I'm making a decision. I want to let the assistant manager go, and I'd like to offer you the job as a player assistant manager. What dreams are made of. No, it's what I wanted to do from the age of probably 7 or 8. Let's get into the management side. Snapped his hands off. He asked me what I felt we needed. We both agreed that we needed a younger, hungrier side. We went and signed players like Lee Allinson, who's conference player now at Dagenham. And it was brilliant. Absolutely loved it. The next step in the managerial career. And then 5 months, 6 months into that, Dad got the job at St Albans, and I moved there.
Would you go there? What as his assistant manager?
Yeah, so I played a few times. I come off the bench for Biggleswade. Dad had got the job. I was on to him. I felt that he was too good to be out of the game. He was doing like a director of football at Borehamwood, and I think if Dad looks back now on his time at Borehamwood, I think he wishes he'd have gone full time when they went full time, but he couldn't do it because of work, and he sort of changed his role, and I didn't feel it was right for him, and I was pushing him to get back in managing. He got the St Albans job, and I think I was when I go back to that big fish in a small pond, I was a character in that, and when I felt like I was the big fish, I was a real character. I was a laugh and a joke a minute. I'd done some mad things as a player. Stuff we wouldn't be able to repeat on here. Some of the things I was up to. I was mad, but I was brought up in changing rooms, and I think he'd see a change in me in terms of my coaching, in terms of how different I was. I wasn't that person anymore, and he watched me a few times, and he got the job at St Albans, and he asked me to go in as assistant manager or joint assistant manager with Harry Wheeler, second from bottom in the league, 14 points on the table, crowds of 250. And I took the opportunity, and very, very quick, funny story. 3 months, the season before joining St Albans, that a lad in midfield called Sam Corcoran, who played for St Albans, at a home game against Biggleswade, I laid a ball wide, and he done me a treat, and I said to him, "Listen, I'll get you back. I promise I'll get you back. Don't ever do that to me again." 3 weeks later, we played St Albans, and he rolled one up the line. I've absolutely clattered him, got sent off. I said to him, "I told you I'd do ya." 6 months later, I'm walking in as assistant manager, and Sam Corcoran's sitting in there as a player. That was intimidating. Luckily for me, we've got a great relationship, me and Corks, but that was intimidating. You know, I was walking into a change room where I played against a lot of these players. I probably acted like an idiot against some of these players, and now I'm a different person, and now trying to portray a coach and an assistant manager. And our first game was against Bath, and I wasn't happy. As I'm a get out there and do it manager. I'm a pusher. I get the best out of people, and I sort of had to sit down. Dad and the other assistant at the time, Harry Wheeler, were taking the game, and it was a bad game. We got beat 2-0. And I remember waking up in the morning. I said to my wife, I said, "Listen, I'm going to go back to Biggleswade. I can't deal with what I've had to go through yesterday. I can't sit on the bench and watch that all season. I was Biggleswade. I'm taking the games with the gaffer." So I went round there the next day. I said to Dad, "I can't do this." He said, "Well, listen, if you're going to throw the towel when you ain't right for me," he said, "give it another game." I give it another game. It was Western-super-Mare at home. He let me get involved and more on the touchline. And I remember now, I say it now, you know, they've got crowds to 3,000 now. They're 250 through the gate. The club was a shambles when he took over that football club. Absolute shambles. What he done in that 7 years was incredible. And he turned that football club on his head, and he done so well there. And hopefully they'll go on to good things, St Albans, because it's a real good football club. Yeah, we got involved, and I got heavily involved, and that was it. Next 3 years, loved it. Assistant manager at St Albans for the next 2.5 years before becoming manager.
So, was you there any of the cup runs?
Yeah, I was there when we got to Carlisle at home. Great game. We should have won. Junior Morais was outstanding, you know, and this is what I say to players now, players that are looking to move on. Junior Morais couldn't get in the Borehamwood team. He decided to step down the level and come and play for Dad because he played for him before. Junior coming through the door, what a character, infectious, unbelievable. And he walked through the door, and within 6 months, he was signed by Peterborough. It just shows you that you can drop down a level and still have the opportunity to kick on to the Football League. Because he had the belief and the desire. And we played Carlisle in the FA Cup first round, got beat 4-2 in the end, I think it was, but running very, very close. Didn't do the last one because obviously I was manager at the time, but I supported Dad the whole time while he was there. I loved it, and any good play I got that done well with me always went to St Albans and kicked on after when I became manager.
Dad's a bit like Mr. FA Cup for non-league, isn't he? I mean, you seem to be always on the TV, wasn't he?
It was a strange one because he had lots of bad runs, but when you've been a manager for 33 years, you're going to have a few good ones in there somewhere, aren't you? And they seem to come at the back end. So he had a couple of good ones with Borehamwood, and he's had last year what they done. I think his biggest disappointment last year was not performing against Borehamwood. Borehamwood were just too strong on the diet, but they didn't really give a great account of themselves because I knew that St Albans were a good side, but they didn't really turn up on the day. But you know, to beat Forest Green at home, I'd love to have been there. I didn't go. I watched it on the telly. But you know, a very, very proud moment for me watching Dad be able to achieve that, especially after what he's gone through this year. I think, you know, what he's done there and being able to do that was great memories for him.
Plenty of free Heineken, yeah?
Yeah, plenty of free.
So, I mean, from there then, so you then decided to quickly go on and jump on to management. You said, was that straight in at Hendon?
No, so I got a call second from last game of the season. I was at St Albans. I got a call from from Chris Nunn. Said, "Lee, I'm stepping down at the end of the season. I want you to take the job." I'm weird. I rang my dad and cried. I don't know why. I was sobbing down the phone. Not that I've been. It was like a mixed emotions that I had to leave what I was doing, and I loved working with Dad. It was brilliant, but I had to take this opportunity. And I said to him, "What do I do?" He said, you have to go. You have to take the opportunity." So I remember my last game, we still had a chance of being in the playoffs. We missed out against Bath on the last day. I spoke to the players at St Albans, very emotional, very hard thing to do. And then took the gamble and went to Biggleswade Town. Built a new side from scratch, had a fantastic first season. Finished 7th. I think it was the highest place that they'd finished in the league. When I think we should have got in the playoffs that year. If I never lost Joe White to injury, we would have got in the playoffs. But I look back on that with fond memories. One, Maurice Dorrington gave me the opportunity to be in my first manager's job. I'll never forget it. You know, we don't probably see eye to eye. I don't think he liked how things worked out at Hendon, but it was the right time for me then. But I'll never forget the opportunity he gave me to manage. Never forget that. Great football club, and I had my great times there. David Longking, I signed him out of nowhere. He'd been released from loads of Step 4 clubs, couldn't get a club. I started him centre midfield for me, ended up dropping him in at centre half. Unbelievable. Ended up with an England C cap, a Step 3 footballer with an England C cap. Then went on to St Albans, then went on to the Football League. Solomon Wabakai come in, £120 a week. He was on the kid, didn't ask for a penny. Ended up Football League player, went St Albans, Football League player. So we had some great times there. We went to AFC Fylde in the FA Trophy, done it properly, stayed the night before. They were third in the conference at the time. How we never got a result that day, I'll never know. We were brilliant. We had a really good side. And finished that season 7th. I had a job interview for a Conference South club after that season and missed out. And that probably just threw me a little bit in terms of getting your head back in the game. And then decided to do another year at Biggleswade, and it started slow, it started hard, and then we just hit form. We got to third in the league, and then crazy football club Hendon got in touch with me and asked me to become their manager. And it was actually a tough decision, but so the best decision I've made without a doubt.
Was that after Gavin?
No, that was after James Gray was the manager then. So he built a side from absolute scratch, and the second year was quite tough. And yeah, I took over from him. I say a hard decision to make. I was third at Step 3 with Biggleswade, and we had a good side. And I left to go to a team bottom of the table, and a poor team at the time, if I'm honest. And yeah, I remember Farnborough was my first game. We lost 4-0, and I rang up my dad and said, "What have I done? I can't believe what I've just taken on. This is bad." But no, look, best decision that I made. I love it.
And I mean, you brought Joe with you as well. Has Joe sort of come? Is there certain players that you've sort of? I know there is with certain managers. You've got like a very small core, maybe, of players that sort of come with you as you go along.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate. I mean, looking back, I mean, I'm really stressful time. I don't know why I thought this, but I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll go to Hendon and I'm going to take 7 players with me. And there's nothing Morris or anyone else is going to do about it. I must have been so blasé to it. Well, the stress the next 2 weeks caused me, because that wasn't the case. That couldn't happen. So we ended up striking a deal with, obviously, Chris Nunn took the job back, and Nunny knew there was players that wanted to come with me. We ended up striking a deal that Nunny would allow certain players to come across. So I took 6 players. Joe was still a Stevenage player at the time, but all I wanted to do was get Joe back through the door. He'd played for Hendon before. It was local to his house. So we'd then done a deal with Stevenage, and we'd got 7 players through the door from Biggleswade Town into Hendon, and mixed with what we already had. We ended up having a really good season, winning 6 on the spin, and then COVID hit.
And that was sort of COVID hit the first time, then hit the second time, and it was almost as if you started, but you couldn't really actually get started.
Yeah, and that was where it was tough. I had a really good group, and the problem with COVID is everyone had different views and wanted to do different things in life. And I lost players like Eddie Ashodi, irreplaceable. I had Jonathan North in goal, best goalkeeper in the league, wanted to go back to Step 2, and I'd have kept him them seasons, and he might have enjoyed it enough that he wanted to stay. Tommy Smith retired. Percy Kiembenny I ended up losing. Solomon Sambu took a break from the game. All these players that were top players for the level, you're sort of having to rebuild. Sam Corcoran, won't mind me saying, he put on about 17 stone in lockdown. Trying to get him back fit was difficult. You know, and that was where it was tough. Players like Kieran Forbes having to come back from 2 years out virtually from COVID. It was really tough, and that's where then the rebuild has kind of started. And as I say, it's not hit the heights that I wanted it to hit at the moment as a manager myself with what I want to do. But look at it, we stay in the league, we keep going, and we keep rebuilding, and hopefully it will turn.
And of course, we're right up to date now with where you are. But I mean, I suppose the one good thing on a funny side, maybe it's only one trip down to Plymouth this year.
Only one trip. Listen, I'm gutted. I'm actually gutted because I'm very, very good friends with the Truro manager. So I was delighted for him when he got promoted. We still talk now, so he hasn't got too big time that he's in the Conference South. But no, he's a top man. But I actually like them trips. I really do. I don't like going there. I mean, we went to Plymouth last year twice. We got beat 4-0 and 6-0 and had our keeper sent off against Plymouth Parkway. And yeah, dreadful afternoon. So they're tough places to go, but only one trip to Plymouth, and we've got Tiverton there. And although they're long journeys, they're not as far as they have been. You know, we have lost Weston, we've lost Yate, so we're kind of in that Southampton, Portsmouth area, which it isn't as far, but listen, still journeys to do in the league, and a league again that's going to be very, very tough. But if I can get through the door, that what I'm after, players that I feel I can kick on, and players that can kick the football club on, I think we can have a really good year next year.
Oh, absolutely. I think you've done a fantastic job there so far. I think every Hendon fan that will watch this would say exactly the same.
No, I appreciate that, and that's the thing. You know, I put a lot of pressure on myself because I want to succeed at the football club, and you know we've got bigger gates through the door, and that was a big plus for us, and just good people at the football club, and I want to put them back on the map, and you know, I want to do well there because they're great people, and you know, if I can bring them success, that'll be a brilliant thing. So hopefully we can do that next year and have a real good go at it. Because I think if we do this right, we can have a real good go next year and try and get in them playoffs and have one of them seasons.
And of course, as well, on another plus note, you've got the old man. We've had to give you a bit of advice on the way through as well.
Yeah, he's brilliant, you know, and he has a heart attack every time I speak to him because I've offered another player a deal or something like that. But you know, he's in charge of the finances with the budget, and I get let loose sometimes. And but no, he's good. Listen, experience is magnificent, and you know, we get the right coaching team around us, and you know, the right people. My wife, what she does with the kit and the social media stuff with the new chairman that's coming is brilliant. The secretary's great. It's just good people, you know, and I want to surround myself with good people. There's so much negativity out there all the time, and you know, one bad result or a few bad performances, or you know, so much pressure on people. And I said it to you last time, I think it was on there. Unless you've been in the manager's shoes, you shouldn't really comment because you haven't got a clue the struggles they go through or we go through. It's our job, really our job, and you can only control the controllables at times. Yeah, we have to do better. I'll make sure of that we do because I'm not settling for what I went through last year. And if I do, we'll have to improve really quickly. But it's a tough gig. And a lot of people have got a lot of opinions. And at times I feel like they should keep their opinions to themselves because they haven't got a clue the struggles. They haven't got a clue what people put themselves through. They haven't got a clue what people put their families through. So before they comment, they should take a look at themselves and make sure they've got their own house in order before they comment on other people. They're just trying to do an honest job. They're just trying to do, and I'm not speaking on myself here. I'm speaking for a lot of people, a lot of managers. There's a lot of good managers, a lot of managers that we don't see eye to eye. But I tell you what, I've got a lot of respect for them because this ain't an easy job. It's a tough job. It's a tough gig, and you know, I think there should be a lot more respect given to managers, and whether that's managers in work, out of work, they'll be in work at some point. It's hard, and I know the stress and the strain that they all put on each other, put on their families, and it's very, very tough. And you know, we go through a lot of wins and losses and highs and lows, and yeah, everyone will have their time and their day, and it's a tough job, but one that I wouldn't change for the world. I'm missing it already. I can't wait to get back out there, to be honest. And it's I need to get my holidays out of the way and spend a bit of time with the family, and then we go to work.
Happy days. Listen, mate, Matt, it's been a fantastic hour with yourself, and wish you all the family all the very, very best. Stay with me afterwards.
Thank you, mate.
Got a couple of bits to tell you off air.
No problem, mate.
And literally a massive thank you, as I said, to Lee, to everybody at Hendon as well. I hope you have a great season as well next year. And of course, a massive thank you to everybody for watching. Hopefully, in our next episode, we will have the one and only Mr. Matt Letizia joining us. So that will be great to have a chat with Matt next week. But until then, thanks again for watching, and good night.